If you are no longer affected by the judgment of others and you stop judging yourself, would you make different choices? Everyone has the potency to make inspired choices. Get ready to listen, share, and experience the creativity that is you. Now, here's the host of Inspired Choices radio show, Possibilities Coach, Christine McIver.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have got another dynamic guest with us tonight. We are going to continue with the Feminine Potency Through the Power of Your Voice series. This guest is Aideen T. Finnola. She is absolutely a potent woman. She absolutely is using her voice in the world. It is phenomenal. I cannot wait to bring her on for all of you to learn from her as well. Before we jump into tonight's show, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. If it's the first time connecting with me, you will want to know a little bit about me. I'm a pretty straight shooter. I'm a holographist coach, an inspirational speaker, TV and radio personality, and the founder and owner of this Inspired Choices Network. I'm also someone that works with individuals and with businesses. Some of my programs really get to the heart of your desires, whether it's the pleasure of your business, whether it's learning to up your ask, or it's our Divorce with Dignity program. I work with all individuals and businesses to move in the direction quickly and effectively to create what it is that they desire. If you are interested in possibly learning more about what I do and how I do it, you can connect with me on my personal website, inspiredchoices.ca. Now, I don't want to take up any more time because tonight is going to be rocking. Let me talk to you about what our show is tonight. Our show tonight is called How Purity Culture Damages Women's and Men's Sexuality. So tonight we have Aideen, or Aideen T. Finnola is her full name. I get to call her Aidee, though, because she's my new friend. Aidee is a life coach, a public speaker, and an author. During this show tonight, we are going to speak to the issues of how purity cultures damage both men and women's sexuality. This is going to be a very provocative and maybe even uncomfortable conversation as we invite people to expand their point of view. Now, let me tell you about Aidee. She is an unapologetic and empowered survivor of and thriver after physical, emotional, psychological, and religious abuse. For the first 2 decades of her life, she was raised by abusive parents who were zealous members of a religious cult. For the second 2 decades of her life, she was unsuspectingly married to a closeted gay man who was emotionally and psychologically abusive. Wow. Today, she is a practicing Martha Beck-trained life coach, a public speaker, and a wonderful author. She coaches and speaks all over the world, teaches others how to reclaim their lives by transmuting their pain into empowerment. She specializes in coaching straight spouses, evangelicals, and cult survivors. Her autobiography, detailing the insights she has gained on her own healing journey to reclaim her life, is called My Exquisite Purple Life, Insights from a Woman Who Never Should Have Made It But Did. That book has had me mesmerized. Aidee, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christine. It is my pleasure to be here. I'm thrilled to talk to you tonight.
I'm thrilled to have you on and have all my listeners learn about you and really hear about your journey. I've had the pleasure of listening to your autobiography with you reading it, which has been absolutely mesmerizing. I'm having trouble getting my work done because I'm listening to your book so much. But it's seriously, you are a beautiful writer, and I find it empowering for me to listen to the person's voice as describe their journey. And you absolutely have had quite an amazing journey. And talk about potency. I mean, you are just such a perfect candidate for this series because you have used your voice and you continue to use your voice and step into your potency greater and greater, which I just think is so amazing. And for everyone listening, you need to go check out her website. So it's Aideen T Finnola. That's AIDEENTFINNOLA.com. And you can connect and get this amazing book. It's on Amazon, correct, Aideen?
Yes, it's on Amazon. It's on BarnesandNoble.com. It's also through my publisher, which is BalboaPress.com. Okay. And it is, as you know, it's in audio, so you can get it through Audible as well.
Through Audible as well. Yeah, it's so good. So, all right, there's so much to talk about. It's so funny. It usually doesn't tongue-tie me, but you can hear how tongue-tied I am tonight. I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm just thrilled. I love talking about these all of these topics, and I'm super excited to talk with you as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, let's just dive right in. I'd love for you to kind of give us a journey of these first 4 decades of your life, of really a snapshot. So it sets the stage, I think, for our conversation tonight. But I think it's really important that we understand more about you and your journey before we really dive into this topic.
Oh, absolutely. So as you mentioned in your introduction of me, I was raised by abusive parents who were zealous members of a religious cult. They joined when I was 8 years old, and I left in my early 20s, like around 22, 23. And then I did go directly into, it's interesting because, we are going to talk about purity culture tonight. And the interesting thing is I was raised in that culture, although I'm 51 and we didn't have that vocabulary back then. But being raised in purity culture, and I know we'll dive a lot more in detail in a bit, but being raised in that really set me up for ending up in what is called a mixed orientation marriage, because my ex-husband is a closeted gay man. He was closeted when we got married. Unfortunately, he still is closeted, and but it just sets you up for that. And so because I was 22 years old when I met him, and he was the first man I went on a date with. He was the first man I held hands with. He was the first man I kissed. He was the first man I did anything with. And from hi, it's nice to meet you, to the altar was 18 months. And wow. That kind of a background, it just sets you up for being just completely ill-equipped. I was so ill-equipped. I shouldn't. The way that I said it in my book is I said it was about as responsible as giving a child a gun to play with. Right. I had no more awareness of the seriousness of what I was embarking on, and I had no skills and no awareness of the consequences. And so I ended up in that marriage, and it never crossed my mind that he could be anything but heterosexual, because as I was raised, homosexuality I was told it was a sin and it was a perversion, etc. And I thought I didn't know any LGBTQ people. Of course I did, but they were all closeted.
They were all closeted.
Yes, 100%. Right. And that is what happens in purity culture, and that is what happens in environments of religious extremism. They have the same percentage of LGBTQ people as the general population, but 100% of those LGBTQ people will be closeted, because
right.
If you come out, you are kicked out, or worse yet, put into the conversion therapy. And so I ended up then I ended up married to him, and it took me a very, very long time. I think we were married about 10 years before it even began to seriously cross my mind that he might be gay. I thought for the longest time that there was something wrong with me. So, and then it took
right.
me another 10 years to find the strength to leave that marriage. And in the process, unfortunately, I ended up in a really, really bad place because of the cumulative abuse of what I had suffered in my childhood, and along with what I was currently suffering in my marriage, I ended up a pack-a-day smoker, a very heavy drinker. I was chronically overweight, etc. And I was very suicidal. I was on a very high dose of antidepressants because I was very suicidal. And that is why the subtitle of my book is as it is. So
it's so understandable. I mean, when you listen to your journey and you listen, and I just want to dial back to your childhood a little bit. Can you give us a couple of examples on how abusive the situation was that you were raised in, and this cult? You were in a cult, and initially it does, as you started to describe it, it didn't seem like a cult, but as you kept going in the book, it was like it's shocking to the degree that you were affected. Can you just give us a couple ideas of what it was like?
Well, it's fascinating because, as a public speaker, oftentimes the way that I will try and give my audience a point of reference is I'll say the formula for my childhood was you start with the Duggar family. And I don't know how many of your listeners will understand that reference, but the Duggar family is from that show 19 Kids and Counting.
Yes.
And it's extremely, extremely conservative and rigid and et cetera. But then I say, okay, so you start with them, but you subtract 17 children because I only had one sibling. I had a sister. And then you add in Jonestown. And people much younger than me will not quite get that reference, but that Jonestown is where we get the expression "don't drink the Kool-Aid" from. And
yes,
for your younger listeners, they can Google that really quickly. But you add in Jonestown, and then you subtract the mass suicide because that didn't happen in my cult. And that's the formula for my childhood. It was that conservative, that rigid. It was that crazy as well. And when you ask about the abuse that I suffered, it was kind of all encompassing and across the board. But I'll just shoot you a couple of things that I think it'll give it a point of reference. My parents took the biblical admonition of spare the rod and spoil the child very seriously, and my father, quote unquote, spanked my sister and I with a 2x4. And no one questioned that. And that's how we were regularly spanked, and that happened, sometimes almost daily or twice a day or whatever. And I didn't even understand that was abusive until I was in therapy in my middle 20s. And a therapist said, no, that wasn't spanking, that was beating, But then there was the sexual repression, there was the psychological abuse. One of the things I say in my book is that of all the wrongs that I suffered at my parents' hands, the most damaging and the most hurtful, and I feel the most abusive, which is going to sound very nebulous, but it is that I was told every day and in every way that who I am was wrong and bad.
It's just it's shocking, and I know that this is still going on in the world with people, and to think to listen to you talk about this today, and as I was listening to the book, it's heartbreaking to think that a child would be treated, like an animal, and yet animals are treated more kindly than you were treated.
Yes, many of them are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That you don't look at a dog, you don't look at an animal or a dog every day and say everything about you is wrong. And yet every message you received from your parents and from this cult was saying that to you. And on top of that, the fact that there was so much division around sexuality, and there was no education, there was no real allowance for you learning, set you up big time for the next 20 years. And I wonder, how many people came out of that and are still in very terrible relationships, are denied the pleasure of having a partner who, loves, inspires, cares for them because of the abuse of this cult. Oh,
yeah, you're right. I mean, I I'm in touch now with only one or two people who went through it with me from my childhood. As is true in a lot of situations like that, we all just kind of dispersed. And unfortunately, a good deal of them stayed in it because it's still around. But when you talk about that, those long-lasting effects, it has taken me, I'm still unpacking it. Thankfully, the majority of it I have unpacked already, but it took me such an incredibly long time to understand that my body is mine, and it's not sinful, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I mean those statements right there are so multi-layered. We could spend 5 hours unpacking each one of those statements. When I say there's nothing wrong with my body, it's like, okay, that goes to my physical appearance, that goes to the operation of my body, the performance of my body, the pleasure of my body. I mean, just on and on and on. It has taken me a very long time, and it's funny because there is a whole chapter that I wrote in my book that I called I May Have Been a Slow Learner, but at least I wasn't a no learner. And that's kind of been my joke about my own journey is I just know I had to come to a place in my life where I realized as I looked at my life as a whole, it was like, wow, okay, I can stop being so hard on myself. I started so far behind the start line when the gun went off, like there were no other racers in sight, there were no other runners in sight. And it took me, most people were finished with the race before I even got to the start line, and so it has taken me quite a long time to unpack it, but the journey has been worth it, so.
Well, you're definitely a voice in the world for those out there that have experienced this, were raised in this. You went on after your childhood and you married a man who was a closeted gay man who knew what he was doing. You said that he dated many women but chose you because you were available emotionally, psychologically. You weren't aware that he was gay, and he was able to kind of pull it over your eyes.
Yeah, and he actually had not dated very many women because he was not raised in the same cult that I was, but he was raised in an equally repressive, conservative, extreme religious environment. We met when he was in medical school and I was in undergrad at the university that we both attended, and he, during medical school, was brought into the cult, and that's how our paths crossed. But you are definitely right. When there was a point in my book when this is in the chapter that is entitled "It Wasn't My Fault, but It Was My Responsibility," and I talk about how the way that I say it is that he did it is on him, that he did it to me is on me, or was on me, because although he did not date a ton of women, he had only had one girlfriend really before me, but there were other women in the cult that he could have chosen from and other women that he could have targeted, as well as I could have said no. I could have said, because when I look back, I can see that relationship, even from when we were dating, was not meeting my ideal of what I wanted in a relationship. And so I could have walked away. Now, that said, with a tremendous amount of compassion that I do have for myself at that age, I really didn't know any better. So that, that's that balance between it really wasn't my fault, and yet it was my responsibility because I was an adult. And likewise for him, he was very, very pressured by everyone to pretend that he was straight. That wasn't his fault, but that still was his choices were his responsibility.
Right. I absolutely love that part of your book. I listened to that a couple of times. I'm not going to dive into my story, but there definitely were some similarities in when I looked at my past marriages And it was that piece where you don't let the person off the hook, but you have responsibility in the choices that you were choosing and how you really showed up with your knowledge about what's going on, and your willingness to acknowledge the truth is your responsibility. So I absolutely love that part. We've got so much more to talk about. We're up for our first break. Stay tuned, everyone. We're going to keep diving deep into this story, and when we come back, we're actually going to start talking about, because I think we've set the stage well now, for the topic of how purity culture damages women and men's sexuality. So everyone, stick around. We're going to be back here with Addie Finnola right after this break. You're listening to the Inspired Choices radio show on the Inspired Choices Network with myself, Christine McIver, and we'll be right back.
Many of us make choices in our lives based on the past or what others think. What would our lives be like if we made choices based on what we desire in this moment? By tuning in to Inspired Choices radio show with Possibilities coach Christine McIver, you'll receive tools and inspiration you can use to do just that. You are an infinite being with infinite choices. Are you ready to create the life and living you truly desire? Listen for Inspired Choices radio show every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is Inspired Choices Radio Show with Possibilities Coach Christine McIver. To participate in the program, call in the U.S. 815-880-8255. In Canada, 613-800-8736. Or Skype us at Inspired Choices Network. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email by sending to Christine@InspiredChoices.ca. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. We are here tonight with Aideen Finnola, and we're talking about how purity culture damages women's and men's sexuality. Now, before going to break, we kind of set the stage with Aideen about what went on in her early years, the cult she was raised in, and then being married to a closeted gay man. Now, Aideen, how did you actually get out of that? Because there was abuse from your childhood, then you're in this marriage, and then you started to self-medicate, and you started to go through some interesting choices. I think there were probably survival choices for day to day, and you're raising two daughters. You had two daughters with this man, which is amazing that you actually got out of all of that. How did you get through to really choosing forward for you?
Oh, that's a really brilliant question. And, as I look back over it, I think there was no mistake that I was born a redhead. I have, and that's not to say that people without red hair can't have fire and fight inside them, but I guess I just always blame it on my red hair. There just always has been a spark inside of me, no matter how beaten down I was, and no matter how much I at times chose to comply and submit and resign myself. There still always was a piece of me that railed against, like, no, this cannot be how it is supposed to be. There has to be something better. I didn't know I had no idea what better could be, and I didn't even know if it was possible, but there was something inside me because, truthfully, from the outside, my marriage to my ex-husband was quite enviable. He was a medical doctor. He was a psychiatrist. He, we had a nice standard of living. I had 2 children. I had, the whole 9 yards. And he was a fairly helpful around the house kind of husband. So in some ways, people looked at me and they were like, what is your problem, when I would say that I was hurting and I was in pain. And there were plenty of times when I tried to say to myself, Aideen, you got it good. What are you crying about? Okay, yes, he never wants to touch you and he is critical and, all the rest of this. But look at this. You have what everyone wants. Can't you just accept it? Can't you? And then I would tell myself things like, not everyone's marriage is happy and there are up and downs. I mean, these platitudes that we say to ourselves to try and get ourselves to accept the status quo. And there were times when I could make myself accept the status quo for a certain amount of time. And then there was just this inner Viking, like shield maiden inside of me. It just was like, no, I cannot. And I have a couple of life mottos. Well, I have a bunch of them, but I have 2 that are tattooed on the inside of my wrist. And the one is my own saying, which is succeed or die trying. And it doesn't mean I'm willing to die for what I want, but it means that I will either succeed or when I come to the end of my life, I will still be trying. There will be no giving up. And then the other quote is from Winston Churchill, which is the famous quote, never, never, never give up. And it was piece by piece and bit by bit. And it was people say 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So much of my life has been 2 steps forward, 1 7/8 step back. It's like, but I just have not ever given up.
Well, I imagine that there were moments that you felt like you were giving up when you were smoking all that, the cigarettes and whatever, the abuse that you were choosing to numb the pain. But there, like you said, there was that spark inside of you that wasn't giving up. And I think that spark that you speak of, that I've spoken of it within me, I think that is in the modern woman today. I think the feminine goddesses that are in the world, they have that spark. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to do this series, Aideen, was because I wanted to stoke that spark in others that are listening to us. And you have been such an amazing leader in showing people that you really can change some of the most impossible situations and you can move beyond it. And, I understand what you're talking about when you were kind of, beating yourself and saying you should be satisfied with what you have. You should be happy with what you have. There's so many people that don't have what you have. I understand that so well. I can remember thinking to myself, because when I first met my second husband, I didn't have a washer and a dryer. And this is going to sound silly, but I thought to myself, well, I'm really lucky that I don't have to go out to the laundromat. I don't have to lug a child and lug all this laundry. I'm fortunate. I'm living in a nice house. In other words, just suck it up, buttercup. Be satisfied. Right. And you're saying, and I'm saying, no. If there's something inside of you that is begging you to change something, please listen to that. Please give that the attention that it deserves, because I believe that each and every person, man or woman, we all deserve to live a joyful, fulfilled, loved life.
Yes.
So with that being said, what I would like to ask is, let's talk about how purity culture damages women and men's sexuality.
Yeah.
Aideen, when you and I were corresponding, you really started to talk to that and how we are taught a lot of times in religion that our body does not belong to us. It belongs to God. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, and I would say there are, purity culture is a huge discussion, but I would say there are the two most damaging things is one, what you already said, is that these young people today, and I was taught that my body was not my own. And I just feel so strongly that if you don't have jurisdiction over your own physical body, what the hell do you have? I think I'm controlling or can control a lot of things in my life, but that's an illusion, right? But if I am robbed of the ownership and the control and the jurisdiction over my own physical body, oh goodness, where do you go from there? And then the second thing the second dynamic in purity culture, which is actually not unique to purity culture, this has been around for 2,000 years, is what is known as the virgin whore dichotomy. And I don't know how many of your listeners will be familiar with that. The virgin whore dichotomy, it specifically fractures women's sexuality, and it creates two polar opposites. And it says you may either be the virgin, who is the good girl, the nice woman, the pure woman, etc., the woman that a man is taught he should marry, and that also is a sexless woman, a completely sexless woman. She has no sexual desire, and she experiences no sexual pleasure. Or you can be the whore who, lucky her, she gets to experience all this sexual, activity and desire and pleasure and everything, but she's a dirty whore, and no one wants, men don't want to marry her. They might want to screw her, but they don't want to marry her, etc. And she is the outcast in society. And I could get into the history of how that got rigged by the church in Rome, in terms of like Mary Magdalene was never actually a prostitute. She was a prominent businesswoman and a landowner in society at the time, and the church basically reworked that story and made her a prostitute. So anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Wow.
I know, that's a whole. I have an undergraduate degree in history, and that was many decades ago. But there are certain things I do remember. But anyway, and forgive me if I'm gonna. Do you mind if I continue with a bit of backstory?
You just go, girl. You just go.
So this is a story from my own daughter's childhood when I was raising them. When my older daughter was maybe 2 or 3 years old, I was reading her a bedtime story, and she jabbed me in my breast. And I said, "Sweetie, don't do that." And she did it again. I said, "Don't do that." And she did it again. I said, "Don't do that." And she said to me, "Why?" And Christine, I have had a few rare moments of enlightenment in my own parenting journey, and this was one of them. And this is what popped out of my mouth. And I said, "Because this is my body, and I get to say who does what to my body." And that became a mantra with my two daughters. And I said that to them, and I taught them that over and over again. This is your body, and you get to say who does what to your body. And I used it in every context. So when my younger one would come to me and say, "Mama, my sister pinched me," I would say, "Did you tell her that this is your body, and you get to say who does what to your body, and you don't want her to pinch you?" And she would say, "No." And I go, "Okay, first you go tell her that, and then I'm going to come in as the mother, And then when my girls became like of junior high age, and I had taught them about sex in an age appropriate way all along, in terms of how our baby's made and where do babies come from and stuff. But then they go into junior high, and now it's going to get really real, and the boys are becoming men and all the rest of it. And I sat them down, and I talked to them about sex, and I really nitty gritty. And I said, how we've always said, this is your body, and you get to say who does what to your body. Now I want you to know that this is your body, and you get to say what you are going to do with your body. And I would say that I empowered them in terms of that, like I granted them ownership over their own body, but I didn't. That was their birthright. All I did was to recognize and to acknowledge and to respect that they were born with, and it was their birthright to have jurisdiction over their own bodies. And that is not what I was given, and that is not what is taught in purity culture. And
well, it's not. You don't have to have been raised in a cult like you were to have bought the lie that as a woman you have to surrender your body in certain ways.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, we were, America started with a very, the Puritans, and that, even though they were the minority in the colonies at the time, they had their culture and their morals and that rigidity, especially when it comes to sexuality, that has pervaded our culture, no matter how secular we've become in the modern day.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. So yes, we need to learn, and we need, we should have been raised, we should be raising or have raised our children to understand that it is their body and it is their choice what goes on with it. But how does this affect, so let's talk about men for a minute. How does the purity culture actually affect men's sexuality if we're speaking about mainly women that feel like they don't have control over what is done or who touches their bodies?
Yeah, so when it comes to the jurisdiction over your body, in purity culture, men are taught the exact same thing in terms of that they are not allowed to enjoy their own sexual pleasure, and they are not allowed to, masturbation, forget about it. Like, that's not allowed at all, that's dirty, that's sinful, etc. But there's this weird under message in purity culture when it comes to men, and that is that men just can't help themselves. That yes, they're not supposed to masturbate, and masturbation is sinful, but boys will be boys and they can help themselves. And the way that damages men is it does not. They are no more integrated in their sexuality when they come out of, or when they're in purity culture than women are, because they are taught that they are living in this body that they are helpless in, and because they're not allowed to pleasure themselves, nor are they allowed to have sex with women, and forget any LGBTQ expressions, certainly that's not allowed at all, and that's all a sin. But so God help the LGBTQ people who are in purity culture. I mean, I can't. That just ratchets it up exponentially.
Right.
But they're taught that they are trapped in this body that they are at the mercy of. And when it comes to the virgin whore dichotomy, it's really interesting because, and I just noticed that we're probably coming up on a break. So why don't I save that, the virgin whore dichotomy thing? I just saw that. Sorry, because I think we're gonna have
to do like 2 hours, 80. I just feel like
that's fine with me.
I feel like I'm on a
talk forever.
I know. This is fabulous. Yeah. So what I really want to get across to people is, my radio show is been called, and it's always been called, Inspired Choices. Mm-hmm. And one of the most important things to me has always been, even when I was having those conversations with myself about the choices that I had made and about where I was on the degree of happy in my life, and what I would always say to myself is, you can always make another choice. You have the choice. You have the choice. And that's the message I would love for us to leave people with tonight. And we're certainly not done. But you have a choice, no matter where you are at in society, no matter what you have endured, come through, created, you have a choice, and you can make another choice if where you are right now is in a place that is creating unhappiness, unease, feeling unsafe, please stick with us. We're going to continue this conversation, but I really want to get that message through that you do have a choice. And what we're talking about is, this is not about, talking about the saddest things in the world, but this is bringing light to where we need more conversation, and we need to be aware that this is still going on today. And it takes a community to begin to change it, and it takes us, each and every one of us, to use our voices as Aideen is doing. So with that, let's go for our second break. When we get back, we are going to have a few minutes left, not enough, to talk about this subject. And also, Aideen, you have got some special gifts for our listeners that I would love you to share when we get back from the break. So everyone, you're listening to Inspired Choices with myself, Christine McIver, my wonderful guest, Aideen Finnola, and we will be right back.
Many of us make choices in our lives based on the past or what others think. What would our lives be like if we made choices based on what we desire in this moment? By tuning into Inspired Choices radio show with Possibilities coach Christine McIver, you'll receive tools and inspiration you can use to do just that. You are an infinite being with infinite choices. Are you ready to create the life and living you truly desire? Listen for Inspired Choices radio show every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you ready to have pleasure with your business? Yes, I said pleasure with your business. The Pleasure of Business a la carte will surprise you with topics like meet yourself in the boardroom, money, services, and you. Expand your visibility. The pleasure of communication. The pleasure of Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. Christine McIver has so much pleasure with business and loves teaching all things business. Beginning a new business? Desiring to expand a current business? Or looking to resurrect a business that has been dormant? This program will get you fired up and bring more pleasure than you have ever imagined. Exhausted with your excuses for not creating a phenomenal business? Join now for all the pleasure with business. Pleasure of Business a la carte gives you total choice for what you desire and what your business requires. That's 24 weeks of different topics to choose from, with weekly calls, audio and video recordings, and PDFs. This class will have you dive right in and use tools to create the business that has been speaking to you. Go to inspiredchoices.ca for full details, or join the Facebook page, Pleasure of Business a la carte. Now is the time for you and your business.
This is Inspired Choices radio show with Possibilities coach Christine McIver. To participate in the program, call in the U.S. 815-880-8255. In Canada, 613-800-8736, or Skype us at Inspired Choices Network. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email by sending to Christine@inspiredchoices.ca. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. If you're just joining, you've got to go back and listen to the beginning of this conversation. It has been amazing. We're talking with Aideen Finnola, and we're talking about how purity culture damages women's and men's sexuality. And Aideen, right before we went to the break, you were going to get into the conversation about the virgin-whore dichotomy. But before we do that, can you share with our listeners the wonderful gift you've chosen to share tonight?
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to give away an autographed hardback copy of my book, which is a $34 value. And I, to be totally honest with you, I'm not sure how anyone wins that, but I will make sure that it gets to you somehow. So there's that. And then I also do, as a life coach, I offer a 30-minute complimentary connection conversation for new clients through my website. So if who I am or my story has resonated with you, if you have a background in some of these issues, please reach out to me, connect to me on my website, because I would love to sit down and talk with you for a little bit.
That would be great. So if you're interested in actually receiving that book, please send Aideen an email, and her email will be in the replay post of this on the Inspired Choices Network, or myself an email, and we will get those together, and we will have a conversation, and then we'll decide how we're going to choose that lucky individual. And let me tell you, it's worth taking the time to send the email. So Aideen's email is AIDEENTFINNOLA@gmail.com, and mine is Christine@inspiredchoices.ca. All right, you definitely want that book. Anyways, back to the conversation. So, Aideen, let's jump in. We've only got about 8 minutes left in our conversation. Oh, my gosh. The virgin whore dichotomy. Go.
Okay, perfect. So, ultimately, like I explained before, that virgin whore dichotomy, it fractures women's sexuality. You can either be a nice girl and never have any sex or sexual pleasure or sexual desire, or you can have all the sex and pleasure, etc., but you're going to be a dirty girl and nobody wants to be with you, and you're not going to have a lasting love. And for the longest time, I think maybe because I am a woman and I came out of that whole virgin whore dichotomy and purity culture, I was really only aware of how it impacted women. And I think it's fairly self-explanatory how it impacts women. And it damages us because we are not allowed the fullness of our sexual experience or our sexual expression. I am both. I am a pure and noble woman, and I love sex, and I love all of the pleasure of it, and I do not want to be inhibited, and I don't want anyone to tell me what I am allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do in terms of sexuality, either with myself or with a partner. But only recently have I become aware of really how much it damages men who come out of purity culture as well. Because although the virgin whore dichotomy doesn't speak directly to a man and how he is, because men don't get villainized for having a sex drive or having lust or anything like that, they get a pass when it comes to that. But now, and again, this is in the context of heterosexual men and women, but if a man wants to be, I say that, and my mind is like, okay, it really could apply to everyone. But I speak to it from my own experience. When a man, if he internalizes the messages of the virgin whore dichotomy, he now ends up with a fractured expression of what's available to him. So if he wants to marry a good woman, a noble woman, or even not marry, just be dating or whatever, when he is thinking about what kind of qualities and what kind of a quality woman he would want to have a life with and have a family with, and he thinks that he has to choose, that it's either or, well, what if he wants to have both as well? What if he wants to have the fullness of his sexual expression in terms of the passionate and tender romantic lovemaking, all the way to the, what we have been taught is the, the dirty sex and the, and speaking from purity culture, really anything outside of missionary position, penis in vagina, that is all that is allowed. So there is no oral sex. There is no, there's no multiple sex positions. There's certainly no anal sex, because that is not, sex is for procreation in purity culture. That's the only thing that it's for. And of course, anal sex does not provide the opportunity for procreation. So, with a man, what if he wants to have a woman, to be with a woman who is a really noble, wonderful woman, and he also wants oral sex? I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to say on your show. So
you can say whatever you want. Hey, honey, I own the network. You say whatever you want to say.
Oh, so then let me say, what if he wants to get his dick sucked, right?
Yeah.
What if he wants ass play? What if he wants to go down on a woman? And likewise, what if a woman wants to do these things? But
right.
now and I have seen it because, of course, I work with the communities of straight spouses, and I work with the communities of what is commonly called now exvangelicals. People who were evangelicals, but they're ex-evangelicals, and or anyone else coming out of religious extremism. And I see it with men as much as I see it with women. I have seen men come out of marriages where they made that choice. I'm going to choose the pure, good woman, and then they ended up leaving their marriages because they had a sexless existence, and there was no room for what they desired in terms of their sexual expression. So,
right, and it's not just extremist cultures that have had this whole belief system, this whole mindset that I was raised Catholic, Roman Catholic, and it wasn't pushed to the degree that you speak of, but it was absolutely understood that, first of all, you are not having sex before marriage because then you are a whore.
You're a dirty girl.
Whore. Yeah, you're a dirty girl. And masturbation wasn't even a conversation. I think I was a teenager before I even knew what that word meant. And, it is still out there, though, Aideen. It's still out there in all sorts of cultures that it's either or. Either you are a good girl or you're a whore. And we've got to change this, because what we are actually doing, what I'm seeing and experiencing with my clients, is the disdain of their own bodies, because their bodies are asking for more. It's asking to express sexually, but the mind and the psychology is stopping them from really moving forward with their desires. And
it comes back to who owns your body. And if you can give yourself ownership over your own body, then it becomes much easier to say, well, if I am the one who owns this body, I can play with it. I can put it in bed with whoever I want to be in bed with. I can stick anything into it that I want to, as long as you're the owner of your body.
Right. Oh, my gosh. Do you know that we're coming up to the end of the show? How did that happen
I know,
so fast?
That.
Oh,
I had no idea your show was only 5 minutes long. That's what it feels like. I'm just
a 5-minute conversation. I know it goes so quickly, especially when it's such a luscious conversation. I so appreciate your time, and I just want to say that I think you are absolutely a force to be reckoned with. You are a feminine goddess who is using her voice to change the world, and I so appreciate knowing that there are women like you in the world that are saying, no, never, ever, ever am I going to stop. And it's amazing. I'm going to continue to savor your book. It is so beautiful. And I hope that one day we can have another conversation and share it with all of our listeners. If someone is out there and they are struggling, please reach out to Aideen. Please come back, check the replay of this. You can listen to this again. You can get all of the information on how to connect with Aideen, and you can connect with her on Facebook as well. You have a Facebook page called My Exquisite Purple Life, the name of your book.
I don't think I have it for my book. I have Aideen T. Finnola on Facebook.
Yeah, I found another website page that you created, My Exquisite Purple Life.
Oh, my goodness. That's from a very long time. I think that's from even before I wrote my book. Oh, my goodness. That's funny.
Well, listen, nevertheless, reach out, take advantage of these wonderful gifts, and Aideen, keep being amazing and brilliant in the world. It's fantastic. So,
and thank you for what you do.
You are so welcome. Until next time, my friends, remember, you can always make another choice. Keep choosing for you, and remember, your body, your choice.
Thank you for choosing to listen to Inspired Choices Radio Show. Christine McIver will return next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by making the choices that bring you all that you desire.